All right. I'm so happy to welcome to the program here today. We have Gary P Caton with us, joining us for a talk on the Venus-Mars cycle, which, well, conjunctions in particular, but I can't wait to pick his brain about all this. So thanks for joining me, Gary.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Mel. It's great to be here.
Yeah. And so I've always, there's many times that I was like, oh, I want to have Gary on the podcast. And just for some reason, after reading some of the posts that you had made on Facebook about Venus Mars cycle, and I saw the two conjunctions coming up, I was like, I feel like there is no better guest to invite onto the program than Gary at this time. And I haven't really formally met Gary before. So this is our introductory period. You get to all listen to it as we talk astrology together. But how I was introduced to Gary was actually in 2018 at UAC. I went to go buy a book from Adam Gainsbourg, The Light of Venus, and you were next to him at the book. I think you were selling your book, which
Yeah,
is the Mercury Elemental Year, Hermetica Triptica, right
yes.
here, which is an excellent book. I highly recommend that to follow the Mercury and the cycle. And I remember Adam was like, "Oh, you can buy this book." His book, and he was signing it. He's like, but the book you need is Gary's. And you were kind of like, you're like, oh yeah. But you were already sold out at that point. Like I couldn't even buy the book. It
That's
was
my
gone.
bro. Adam is one of my very best friends in all the world, and he's really great like that. Yeah, that's a really cool moment, And yeah, I was blown away. Like I was talking to the guy at the bookstore, Gregory Nalbandian, and was like, and he's like, yeah, just send one box. It's your first time, probably, want some. It's a pain in the butt to like follow up afterwards and everything. And that box of books sold out like that. And I was like, dude, unbelievable. I should have brought two or three boxes. But yeah, that was fun. That's really cool. That's a great
Yeah.
memory. Yeah.
It was, and the book. It's funny. The book ended up coming about to me in a different way. A friend gave it to me after like
Right on.
a handful of months after the fact, and so it ended
Excellent.
up getting in my hands. But and that's the thing that you and Adam both share is you do a lot of work with cycles and
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah, Adam was a really key figure in my evolution as an astrologer. I've been doing this a full Saturn cycle now, believe it or not. It's kind
Mm.
of hard for me to even believe. This is my Saturn return as an astrologer this year. And yeah, I started out as a modern astrologer in the early 90s, like that was really the only choice at that point in time. Modern astrology, I learned from, like Grant Louie and Liz Green and Rujar and all those, Robert Hand, those kind of people. I basically just picked up every book I could at the used bookstore for like $5 or less, because that's kind of what my budget was at the
Yeah.
time. And I started, following my transits. I learned astrology by I got a really good day planner by this cat named Tom Roma, and I still have his day planner. It's within arm's reach at all times on my desk. And I started. It's got really great. He's like a Virgo kind of person. He's got really great data in there, and I just started following my transits and saying, okay, this is the transit I'm having today, and keeping a journal of what happened. And I just started, okay, like this means this, that means that. Like this life is going to show me what this all means, because I became an astrologer from a dream that I had, which unbidden, I just had this dream where I saw Venus in the heart of the sun. And I was like, what the heck? And I got an old Rosicrucian ephemeris. And for those of you who may not even know what the hell an ephemeris is these days, you don't necessarily need one. It's a book of tables of planetary positions, right? And so I just intuitively, I was like, I wonder if that's like literally telling me. And it was like there was a Venus Sun Cazimi the day of that dream. And I was like, holy shit. And so I didn't know what the hell to do with that, but I just thought, see what happens, right? And so yeah, and then through happenstance, I ended up hitchhiking through Berkeley Springs, West Virginia in the mid 90s when Project Hindsight was going on. And
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, right. I mean, talk about the incredible fortune, you know, got to hang out with Schmidt and that crowd, and you know, was introduced to classical astrology. So by classical astrology, I'm referring to the entire period from Hellenistic Greek, you know, up through the Arab Persian era and into the Renaissance. Like, to me, that's all the classical era. And then Adam, I met at my second trip to Hindsight, which was by way of Michael Earlywine in the 2000s. And we were sitting across from each other. It's one of those kind of things where it's like, I made a comment and then he looked at me and I made another comment. And he's like, we got to talk, you know, whatever. And he introduced me to what I call traditional astrology, which is astrology with your face, you know, visual astrology. He had been hanging out with Daniel Giamario and stuff, and he shared with me Venus's, you know, visual cycle, and I was just blown away. I was like, holy shit. And so those were like the three sort of, you know, different phases of my and now I call myself actually a Hermetic practitioner. I don't even use the word astrologer to define myself, because it's really only one of three of the ancient Hermetic arts, including magic and alchemy, which are as, if not more important in my practice at this point in time. So that's sort of the evolution of my journey as an astrologer. It's been in terms of like the Grateful Dead, it's a long, strange trip. It has been.
Oh, well, it's got to be if it starts off with a dream,
right?
Especially with Venus conjunct a prophetic dream of the moment.
I'm on a mission from the goddess, you know, as they're saying, like in Ghostbusters. We're on
That's
a mission.
Funny.
You know, yeah.
Oh, I love that story. I mean, I ask a lot of guests how they got into astrology, and I feel like you're the first one that was called by a dream, and a very accurate one. Like, it wasn't like symbolic. Well,
Unbelievable.
was
like, how could you
but
not follow that? And here's the thing, like, I was really disillusioned with academia at the time, and I was like, I don't trust this. You know, it doesn't feel right to me. I've got South Node in the 9th house. Like, I was already figuring out, like, yeah, it's not it, you know, and this I could trust. Like, I don't know where that came from, but it's not human, or at least it's not human in the sense of like socio-political bullshit attached to it, you know? And so I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I can trust that one. I'm gonna go with it. And here I am.
Here you are. Do you have a prominent Venus in your
Venus
makeup?
is she's conjunct Mercury at the vernal point. So,
okay.
You know, yeah.
Well, that makes sense then.
Right.
Yeah. Venus has called you in. I love
Certainly
that.
Did. Yeah. Thank you, goddess. Yeah. And you know what's crazy about that? I mean, at this point in my career, it's really wild. After the most recent Venus Cazimi, 3 days later, and it's funny because I was telling people, like, one of the things that Adam and I discovered in this long, strange trip is that certain Venus Cazimis, she can reappear she transitions from evening star to morning star during the retrograde, right? And Adam's seen this with his own two eyes. If you're far enough north in latitude, you can see her as evening star one day and morning star the next day.
Oh, wow.
Only in certain ones of these cycles, though. And this is one of them. And I was saying, like, it could literally be only 3 days of invisibility, you know. And it turns out 3 days after this most recent Cazimi, I got a letter from a young lady. And she's the student of one of my students. So I don't really know her. I've gotten to know her a little bit since then. But she was like, you need to know how important your sharing of the Venus cycles has become. And she sent me dozens of pages of testimonials of women she had worked with who were working with the Venus cycle, and it really made a difference. And this is all from stuff that I shared with another lady, her teacher, in 2010, which was stuff that Adam shared with me, which was stuff that Daniel shared with him, you know, which was stuff that Daniel got from a book called Star Trek to Hawaii back in the 90s, you know. And it's like, it's really incredible to see how this stuff evolves and how it takes on a life of its own. Like it literally, like there's a transmission or a channel of energy or whatever you want to call it that is Venusian, that just beamed into my soul, through my soul with somehow, and now it's just filtering out, and it just widens into this wonderful, beautiful stream, and it's freaking incredible. It's really humbling and beautiful to know that that's happening.
Well, it really speaks to the nature of Venus to begin with, and the connective quality, and how it
Yes.
took so many
Yes.
people to come together in their own creative forms to be
Yes.
able to, bring this to life. And it's only going to continue on, right? And start to morph into different expression.
I love that. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, she would have it no other way.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Each person really does make it their own. And I think that's really important. There is no one right way to do anything in my world. So I'm not even going to try to tell people. I give them what I have. Here's the way I do it. And then invariably, each one of them kind of tweaks it to suit their own worldview, their own unique, integration of it. And I think that's great. And and that's how evolution works. Like evolution, like biologically speaking, adores diversity, because diversity is the maximum choices available, and you never know which one is going to be the one to catch on. And so why not have a lot of them, and I feel the same way about astrology. Like, why not have a lot of them, man? It's like, what the heck?
Well, it makes me think of observer effect, and how important the observer is in what is, perceived, obviously. But also when we talk about this knowledge, like it takes that individual observer and their point of view in order to extract and cultivate all the different forms that the knowledge can take. And it makes me think about when you were talking about earlier about, not kind of trusting academia and going into, and then finding the sky view, like that is observer. It's like you have to observe it and take it in, and then you formulate your own, creative understanding of what that is. And it takes back to like the planner, like if number one, I tell, clients, students all the time, if you want to get to know astrology, you have to track it. You have to intimately track it, be involved with it.
Live it every single day. Yeah.
Exactly. You don't have to necessarily let it rule you, because that can be a little overwhelming for people. Like you just living by but just being aware of it as it comes by, and take note. And as you observe, you just
and
understand
being creative, like you said. I remember when I first got into it, I was at a rainbow gathering, and I needed something to trade, and I had my day planner, and so I started doing solar return readings based on the lunar aspects on the day of the person's birthday, right? Because I was like, okay, we had these aspects, and so the moon's going to progress right through the year. And I was like, and I started testing it out, and I was like, you met a person like this planet, early in the year, and they were like, how did you know? I was just like, I'm making it up as I go along, dude. And it worked really well.
I know. I feel like a lot of people don't, or maybe they do, but I feel like a lot of people don't understand how creative astrology is. It is absolutely, it's an art, of course. Yes. And we do have these specifics that we can look with the, the connections of the planets and the timing but the rest of it makes me think of like Bernadette Brady and the whole like concept of the eagle and the lark. Like you could, the data will only take you so far, and then you need the intuition, which is basically the creative force, to come in and fill in the gaps.
The two hemispheres of the brain and so forth. The goddess, the alphabet, and the goddess, as it were. Wonderful. Yeah, and that's a really good segue into Venus Mars, actually.
Yes.
The two hemispheres of the brain, and the two because it's easy to genderize Venus and Mars, but it's not necessarily genderized. It's like masculine and feminine, right? Which we all have. We all have those aspects. Like in the I Ching, the first two trigrams or hexagrams, I guess, so I've seen them translated as force and field, right? So there's this yang, right? Energetic principle of like assertive, energetic, force, right? And then there's field, which is receptive and embracing, and but the force only has context when it's applied within the field. If it's applied just, that's toxic masculine. When the force is applied without any sense of the field within which it's occurring, it's destructive and out of balance and whatnot. But it's when you can integrate the two of them and apply the force with a full understanding of all of the connections that are happening around it as it's applied. That's beautiful. That's art.
Yeah, I find that Venus and Mars together, I don't know. I keep talking about this in the because I mean, they're considered relationship planets, right? And it's not the only thing they do, but I feel like we're in a relationship. I think Tara All and I were talking about this, about being in relationship with everything that we encounter.
Yes.
There's the effect of how we assert ourselves onto something. And there is also what it comes out of it as we allow ourselves to receive and come in.
That's
and so
really
it's this
cool.
give and take. Yeah.
Yeah, no. That's a really cool synchronicity, because Tara was at the first Sky Astrology conference, which we had under a Venus-Mars conjunction. So,
oh no, Tara, I hope you're listening.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting how even the astronomy of the two planets bears out, as you said. Venus is moist and Mars is dry, right? Mars separates, Venus, brings together. But also Venus is very steady and regular. Actually, the Mayan astrologers used Venus to calibrate their calendar and keep it from getting out of whack, because she's locked into this harmonious rhythm with the earth, which is, the mathematical relationship is phi, phi, right? It's the golden mean, right? So there's this she's really steady, really is almost, in other words, her orbit is almost a perfect circle, right? Whereas Mars is very elliptical and erratic. And in fact, Mars was the hardest planet for Kepler to nail down, right? It really stretched his brain to figure out how the astronomy of Mars within the heliocentric paradigm. So there's this, they are very much archetypal opposites. Even in their astronomy is archetypally opposite. So there's this wonderful complementary and alchemical quality. In alchemy, they talk about the fixed and the volatile, and marrying these fixed and the volatile, and how that produces this magical transformation. And Mars and Venus really are that. They are that archetypal opposite. In the myth, they're very much like that. Venus was actually one of the great things about the Greek gods is how human they are. It's and so they're very relatable. And Venus was married to someone else. She was married to Hephaestus, who was like her, an artisan. He was a craftsman, and so it's a good match. It's an arranged marriage. It's a good match. You think like and like is a good match, right? But erotically speaking, opposites are very hot. And so there's this bad boy Mars, and she's attracted to him, and at the same time, Venus is cool and Mars is hot. So Venus cools Mars's temper, and then when he's exhausted from making love to Venus, he can't wage war. So there's this idea that, oh well, hey, even if it's an illicit love affair, it's better than wrecking the entire countryside. So maybe we ought to just laugh at this, and you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so there's this interesting kind of complementary opposition within their mythology too. And they had 6 children together. So again, Mars isn't the husband, he's kind of the baby daddy, I guess. and a baby daddy he was, 6 children.
A prolific one.
Yes. Eros and Teros, Harmonia, those are the children that take after Venus, the mother, and Phobos, Deimos, and Adrestia take after Mars. So they literally had 3 Venusian type children and 3 Martian type children, which is really fascinating, you know?
Yeah. And the balance that the two, I mean, we think of Venus as being a point of balance, but I feel like there's balance within the alchemical balance of the or the opposite archetypes, right?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
if something is very fixed in its way and something's very volatile in its way, like to find the harmonious, temperance union of it, and that's
Yeah.
where we get the creative results and the things that are exciting about
Mhm.
opposites, and how we grow and we learn from what we
Totally.
encounter by having that. And so yeah, there's that push pull force between the two.
Totally.
And so what would you say now? So here's the thing, is we have 2 conjunctions of them meeting in the sky,
Right.
Intimately fusing together.
Yes.
And it's interesting to have 2 back to back. I know you might give us a little more insight into that. So we have one coming up here on February 16th, which will be
Mhm.
at 16 degrees and 53 minutes of Capricorn, which
Right.
just happens to coincide with a Leo full moon square the node. So it's a lot of energy in the sky to begin with.
Yeah. You know what's crazy about that, Mel?
Yeah.
The moon is in the nakshatra known as Shlesha, which is the stars of the head of Hydra. So there's this serpent energy that's very sexual in nature, and it's Venus Mars, and that happens to be also near the place where the last Venus Mars conjunction
Yes.
happened, which really I would say I would group these, and meaning a la Ruperti, would group these as 3. There's 3 conjunctions of Venus Mars that happen within a 9-month period. And so and they all happen without an intervening opposition,
Mhm.
which is important, right? So in other words, there's not a complete cycle. There's like a part of a cycle, and then it goes back, and then there's another conjunction, then there's a part of a cycle, and then you don't get an intervening opposition until after the 3rd conjunction. So yeah, that's really fascinating to me. Like, wow, that full moon's right there where the previous conjunction, the first of the 3, was. It's like, what the heck? So there's that Hydra energy, that the Kundalini, I guess you would call it,
Mhm.
sacred sexual energy, that's intimated there. So yeah, that's a really potent chart, is it not? Full moon,
It really is. And to think that my mind went there too, because that the first in the sequence of 3 conjunctions happened at, what was it? It was like, yeah, it was like 19 degrees Leo. So it's not too far off from that full moon. And it makes me think, well, I find it interesting too, that
yeah, it
part
was
of this
July
full,
13th,
yeah, July.
1949. Yeah.
So
Pardon.
it makes me think that not only is it interesting that lights up that point right before the moon gets full, but one of the big things about this full moon is that it's freshly square the new nodal axis of Taurus and Scorpio, which is another Venus Mars, placement with
Yeah, that's right. They're the
Venus
rulers of the nodal axis now for, the next little
5
while.
or 3.5 years or something like that
Yeah, and
between the
that's,
back to back.
a lot of people say that the rulers of the nodes are really important because the nodes are points, they're not planets, and they're harder to access because of that. So the fact that you have the rulers of the nodal axis coming together like this is a significant access point to what those houses of Taurus and Scorpio, how they're being transformed, because sometimes it's a little bit difficult to access the nodes directly.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of, they're points, they're shadowy figures, right? And the Vedic astrologers do a really good job of personifying them as if they're planets. West, not so much,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
So
great point.
yeah. So in case you're watching the video, I'm just showing the chart of the full moon coming up here on February 16th. It just happens to coincide like about it's like an hour or so before Venus and Mars meet together.
Yeah,
And
so
so
the
there's,
moon's at the north bending there. Yeah.
yeah. And so not far off from our our
And Mars
19
is
degree point.
decan there. Mars is bounds and decan.
And
Mars rules that.
having Venus and Mars in Venus's over there in Capricorn
Bounds. Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Both Venus and Mars have dignity in a daytime chart in Capricorn, right? So
Mhm.
that's very productive. It's very like it's a very productive meeting, this one in Capricorn. They have dignity. They're able to do their thing, right?
Yeah.
So it feels like, wow, like Capricorn, like we could get a lot done, you know?
Well, it's funny because they're meeting like within a few minutes of my moon position. So I
Whoa.
am very much interested in how this is going to play
Holy
out.
smokes.
It feels
Yeah.
and it's funny because the last meeting, these are my Leo self, always sharing my placements, but the last meeting conjunction at 19 degrees Leo is exactly on my midheaven. So
Oh, interesting.
this cycle has been very much lighting up my chart. But yeah, so I am, as I said earlier, intimately logging what happens with these placements so that I
Excellent.
can
Yeah, it'd be
learn from
great to
them.
see what happens for you as an artist because, you know, in Jungian terms, the mixing of opposites is very, very important in accessing the deeper personality that is, you know, in Jungian psychology, you know, the persona is the mask. It's the outward personality that we use as a way of interacting with this socio-political world, right?
Mhm.
And then the complement to that is the shadow. It's like all the stuff that, well, you know, it's not exactly socially acceptable. So we kind of, yeah, we're not going to bother people with that as much. And then beneath that, so the shadow is kind of, you know, hidden. And so you have to deal with the shadow. And then beneath that, the deeper structure is the anima or animus, which is the true complement to whatever your, you know, consciously, not biological necessarily, but your conscious, you know, gender identity. Um, so the anima or animus would be the complement to that, and so it represents this deeper structure that is somewhat unconscious, and the integration of that is like a wellspring of creative energy, right?
Yeah. I imagine, well, I don't know what I imagine. I have a feeling I'll be imagining many things at that time, but I love how it's just this conjunctions taking place in that cardinal earth. You know, it feels very formative and
Productive,
creative
yeah.
in the sense of something fresh birthing within it, right? You know, I think of being a cardinal person myself. It's like what's next? Where are you
Yeah,
pivoting? What are you starting? What's this found? And we all keep talking about like 2020 and 2021 about this very foundational force that we're under. And so when we bring these two creative aspects together in a foundational sign, especially after going through a Venus retrograde here, you know, it's a long time coming for that. Just getting through the Mercury
right.
retrograde with, it's interesting that Mercury is back at the sun, the inferior Kazemi point at the time of this
Yes.
full moon too. So there's something kind of like a revisiting there, and just has, I don't know, it feels like things are just coming together in a
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. And the
Yeah.
decan, that Mars is in his own decan there too, which is the second decan of Capricorn in the Golden Dawn system. That's rules over the Three of Pentacles. So it's
Yes.
literally like the Lord of Material Works is, I think, their name for that. So it is very productive, and it's like literally the scene in the Rider Waite image, Rider Waite Smith, I should say. I don't want to leave out Pamela Coleman Smith. Is that there's like these two, you know, priestly figures consulting with like a workman, or so it's sort of like the engineer and the workman meeting and discussing the plans for building this cathedral or something like they're getting shit done, you know. So it's pretty exciting actually
Yeah.
to feel
It
like,
has
you
like
know,
the collaborative, it
yes,
has a collaborative effect to it, in the sense that I mean, in that image, you think it's like collaborative because you have the master artisan, but it needs the patron or the person that has the blueprint to begin with. And it's just like you need those two forces that come together to create something. So it makes me think of how many teams might be born, how many businesses might be formulated, or endeavors, or
this could be,
like
and to be clear, beyond the erotic associations, I mean, this could be a wonderfully productive and fertile or fecund, way, for business, because Capricorn. Yeah, absolutely. Like, and there's, the seventh house is business partnerships as much or more as it is, romantic partnerships, right? So yeah, absolutely. It feels very, very much like it's the doorway out of this, stuck place we've been for a while. It feels like a doorway out of it anyways.
Oh, I will open that door. I will walk through it gladly.
Run.
I would say hallelujah.
Like, you're not closing that freaking door on me, man. I'm like the old Bugs Bunny cartoons, like where they levitate for a second and their wheels go zzz,
oh yeah,
and then
Oh, I love it. So, well, okay, so we have that conjunction on February 16th, but it also then at that point Mars and Venus just hold hands all the way until
all the way through the end of the sign. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know where that's going. My chart software is not Astro Gold. What's happening? Oh, I know what's happening. User error. March 5th, when they meet at 0 degrees and 1 minute, they like squeak over the Aquarius line, and then conjunct on March 5th after going through a very interesting experience over Pluto. There's a lot that goes on during those two.
Yeah, we won't comment too much on what goes on in the underworld down there. Like that's private domain. But yeah, like really interesting how close that is to the great conjunction point, right?
Yes.
And as you said, Mercury already activated that point earlier this year, the Cazimi and both elongations activated that point, of Mercury Sun. And so it feels like, again, we've been in this kind of stuck holding pattern for a couple of years. We don't even really know what the Great Conjunction is about yet, because we've been in this sort of time out, and it's like, I feel like these personal planets interacting with that are very much like a transformer in an electrical sense, like a transformer steps down the energy to make it more accessible. And so it feels very much like between Mercury and Venus and Mars all accessing that point. It's like, okay, now we can grab this and go with it. We can start doing and creating with it. And I feel very much excited about that part of it.
Yeah, me too. And what dawned on me too is that it's fascinating how many conjunctions have been taking place at 0 degrees or 0, 1, those first couple degrees of Aquarius, because that's also where the last Mars Saturn cycle began too, at that very same degree. And so to have Mars come to the point of where it met Saturn last, and the limitations of Saturn, of that form of Saturn, now being there with the creative Venus, which is much more open and receptive and a different level of form, like a more of like a motherly container than
valuable
like
form, rather than rigid form. Yeah.
Exactly. And so it makes me wonder what is seated at this time that may have been like laden in the whole Mars, Saturn connection, which let's see, when did that even, they take a while to do that. Let's see. That was March 31st of 2020 was when they met there at 0 degrees of Aquarius. So it's interesting, it's like, what are the chances of all these planets just having to,
I know, right? Yeah, it feels, that kind of stuff feels like, okay, something's going on here. And if I can like tune in with whatever energetic or spiritual or whatever you want to call it, angelic or, divine plan, right? Like, then I can maybe surf a wave that's going to take me, along on a really cool ride.
I feel and I feel like Aquarius, to talk about this long, strange trip it's been.
Yeah.
There's a Aquarius does have that energy to it, or at least I feel like it
Yeah,
does.
Aquarius really, I mean, because of it, the way that it follows Capricorn being, the nocturnal domicile of Saturn, and Aquarius being the diurnal domicile, the nocturnal, being a place of boundaries and enclosement, like the walls of the city, right? And then Aquarius is about going outside of the walls of the city and exploring the unknown. Really, it's about, and then if you just think of it in terms of the agricultural calendar, Capricorn is like that when we get over the hangover from like the Sagittarian party, and then, okay, we kind of sober up, and then, we get our SH back together, get back on track. And then Aquarius is like, okay, remember what the hell we're doing now. Okay. And then we've got a little time before spring planting. So like, let's innovate, let's try something new, kind of thing. And so it's about getting outside of the box any way you look at it, really. And we don't even need Uranus to be a ruler, which is interesting. But yeah, there is that feeling of like exploration and openness and possibilities within Aquarius, that even in a classical sense.
Yeah, and to think about, I mean, because really Saturn's the only one that has this placement where you encounter two signs back to back, and to have that, that the feminine, or the receptive energies of Earth then meet that more masculine outward energy of the air in Aquarius. And so to have those back to back conjunctions, to me also seems, and the fact, like, I mean, they literally have to hold hands the whole time. Like, it's not like one rocket's ahead. It's like, no, this is a steady pace from February 16th to March 5th, where they are intimately connected. And so we have this connection of that first conjunction in this, in a receptive energy that you take in, it's internalized, it's received. And then it gets to a point where it crosses over that edge and can like leave the box and explore the city walls, as you're saying, with the outward motion of what those two can do in a more, in a faster, more tangible, well, I mean, Earth's very tangible, but I mean, just an outward sense rather than being internalizing.
Like getting on with life, yeah, totally. Like, let's make a new world, right? I mean, clearly the old world is gone. Like, we're not going back to what we had before, but there's still a whole lot of living to do, and like, we need to get on with it, right?
Yep. This story doesn't end. It's like, it just keeps going. We know it does end at some point, kind of, in this incarnation.
But this is not the end of the world. Yeah.
No, it's not. So that being said, we kind of like laid the territory that there have been 3 conjunctions in a row. I mean, obviously these February 16th, March 5th, they're really tight together, much closer than back in mid-July there in 2021. But what in your mind do these 3 conjunctions, how do they play a role together? I know you mentioned something about February 16th being kind of maybe the more potent one, or what?
Central one. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you read Reperti, Cycles of Becoming, Reperti very clearly insists that it's the retrograde conjunction. And this one's not retrograde. Venus is stationary rather than retrograde. So it doesn't quite fit his model. But basically, he's saying every 5th conjunction, which is every 6 to 7 years, there's a conjunction that's in the middle of these 3. And the fact that the 3 occur in 9 months, that's like a gestational period, right? So there's this. So it's the center one of these 3. And in fact, even though this one's not retrograde, the one in Capricorn, that is, what stands out about it is that it's Mars is passing Venus, right? So you remember how we talked about the fixed and the volatile, and like that, in alchemy, they say, make the fixed volatile and the volatile fixed. Well, that's what's happening here. The fixed, Mars, the slow one, is passing the fast one. The fast one becomes slow, and the slow one becomes fast, right? Their roles are reversed. So that's why that middle one stands out, is because it's when Mars is passing Venus, and it's the only one where that happens. So whether it's the retrograde conjunction, which Ruperti, when Ruperti was writing that book, there's a larger picture going on here that we can get into, that we can unpack. That's a very, very extended view of the Venus-Mars interactions. But yeah, whether or not it's retrograde or just stationary, the middle one of these three, that's what's going on, is that the Mars is passing Venus, and that's why it stands out. And I think so Ruperti's correct in saying, like, that's the one that's going to set like the energetic foundation for the next 6 to 7 years. And so that's the one where he would say, look at that house, and whichever house that occurs in your chart, focus on that as a place where your values, Venus, are being, reactivated in a new way, where you're acting on either on new values, or you're reformulating your values. There's a new beginning that happens from this mixture of the fixed and volatile.
Which is very interesting to me to have it happen at the mid degrees of Capricorn, and how we're in such a crucial point of time of like talking about values of business and systems and government, and like it just feels very par for the course that because we're trying to rebuild, and so much of this is broken down. You see every day there's a new figure head that is being, stepping down or being disgraced, or all these like just abuses of power, and right. What's messed up with the system,
Pluto and Capricorn is kind of exposing all the rot of the Capricornian structures, and Venus and Mars come along and say, hey, you could try something different, eh?
Yeah, you don't have to do it this way. We could birth it into new form.
Be creative. We could be artists, like there's that.
Well, what really speaks to me about, you said about the fixed and the volatile and them meeting one another, and how we have this unique example of Mars surpassing Venus first. And so if Mars's influence is coming to fixed Venus, there's a volatile aspect that is being initiated at this, and you need the volatile to break up the fixed. So if we're talking about these systems and these orders and these places of power and in the people that are in it,
that's what Mars does. Mars is dry. It cleaves things. It separates them, right? Breaks them up. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You have to break apart the old before you can put it back together into something new. Yeah.
Exactly. So to me, it's I love that you bring that up, because it's like Mars comes along and volatilizes the fixed. I think that's a word. I don't know. I'm going with.
Nice.
And then basically we continue on to have Venus and Mars. It looks like the moon there too, around February 27th, but really from late February into early March there, especially around March 2nd and March 3rd, we have Venus and Mars meet Pluto.
At Mars's exaltation degree.
Look at that.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's like the most volatile, like because I feel like the whole volatile energy of that conjunction just keeps playing out until Venus comes back around to
fixes it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then she hopefully fixes it. Yeah. So, fascinating, definitely.
Yeah, because that conjunction in Aquarius begins a cycle that will be a quote normal cycle, where you will go through the square and opposition and opposing square and another, like a full cycle, right, with all the aspects.
Yeah.
So it really does fix it in the sense of like resuming normal operations.
Resuming normal operations. Yeah, because we've had like 9 months of even longer than that, because before that conjunction back in July, they had made like a sextile in April, that closing kind of, or not closing, I guess so.
Yeah.
And then February was the square, January 2021 was the trine, and really there hadn't been a conjunction, because 2020 was a really weird year for Venus and Mars, their dance where they just couldn't quite meet, but when they did, it was all square energy. And I watched that in my relationships. My relationships were so, but I also have a Venus ruled descendant. So, and being a Mars ruled chart, it was almost comical at times of like how relationships played out and the tension and the turning of the page in 2020 because of that, that squares energy and Mars and Venus retrograding, and it was a fun time.
I'm not telling what I was doing. No,
secrets are good.
Yeah, I feel you. That was like, there was some weird stuff, weird energy that year with relationships. I'm remembering now. I'm like, I think I was conveniently forgetting it, but there you go.
Well, and it's so funny because it's like, it's like hardly anyone got away from it. Like if there's anything about 2020, one of the things about the pandemic and a lot of things that brought to the surface is a lot of relationships, disbanded. A lot of relationships started in unconventional ways or kind of quickly based on the energy. Like there was just this, because when you have time to be by yourself or with one person, or if you're in business, right? And then all of a sudden the business is not operating because of world situation. It's like all these partnerships and
cooped
these,
up together and cabin fever. And,
it's like, how compatible is this more volatile or is this more
right?
Yeah, so that was an interesting energy, and the last time they met in conjunction before that was in August 2019. So there was an interesting dance between summer of 2019 to summer of 2021 with the conjunctions there too. But Gary, I want to pick your brain about like the larger cycle at play that you were alluding to.
Yeah, this really blew my mind and so I got turned on to this first by Robert Blaschke. I was a really big follower of his. I have all his books. I mean, the guy is an incredible astrological mind. He was a blogger for TMA. He was blogging for TMA, and I had just started blogging for TMA. So I was really, on top of following his writings. And he wrote a blog for TMA where he mentioned the aberrations was the word he used in the Venus-Mars cycle. And I was like, aberrations in the cycle? Like what? Like that sounded, kind of dramatic to me. And I was like, what the heck? And he was talking about how the cycle that Ruperti identified in his book was not happening anymore. It was falling apart. And we could see changes in society that were reflective of this. And I was like, wow, really? And I was like, okay, I have got to understand this. So I printed out 2,500 years of Venus-Mars conjunctions. Every single morning, first thing for an hour or so, just went through them and just total Virgo, I'm going to pick this apart until I understand it, And my hunch was correct that this aberration that he was talking about was really not a one-off thing. It was actually part of a larger cycle, about a 300-year cycle, which actually I came to call the 300-year epoch, because in historical terms, 300 years is a pretty solid chunk of time,
Yeah.
And what's really interesting about it is the aberration part lasts about 100 years, and it's very erratic. It's very much like Mars. We were talking about the nature of Mars astronomically is very erratic, and so there's this part of the cycle where it becomes very erratic. And then there's this other part of the cycle which lasts for 200 years that is very regular, and that's the part that Ruperti got. He graphed out the 200-year part exactly right, but he never mentioned this 100-year part that Blaschke brought up, and so I ended up writing a huge essay, I guess you would call it it's probably even a small book if I redid it, and hopefully I will at some point. But I did a 2,500 year astro historiography where I looked at the socio-political, situation within these 200-year periods versus these. And what I saw was like essentially the 200-year period was what we might call a renaissance, or it's a flowering of a particular, it's like cohesive, right? Venus is cohesive and nurturing, and like some cohesive socio-political principle flowers into being, and then it dies and falls apart during the Mars crisis period. So the Mars, breaks it apart and things fall apart and things get crazy, and then it comes back together, and then it falls apart and then it comes back together. Literally one of the last erratic, aberration period, whatever you want to call it, before the one we're in right now, historians across the board refer to it as the general crisis. It's like everything's all effed up, essentially. Like,
just
like,
one big crisis everywhere you look. Mars
generalized crisis. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's like, wow. And so, yeah, so, and that was, like I said, Adam and I decided to do a sky astrology conference in the Bahamas in 2015 around this Venus-Mars conjunction that was happening with the moon at the vernal point. We were like, that'll be really cool. And I was like, what the hell? And so I researched this, what I would call the Ruperti fractal, which is that 5 conjunction, where every 5th conjunction Venus is retrograde, and it just repeats for 200 years, 32 iterations of this fractal. It's very regular, very dependable, da 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 da. And what happens from a sky view is that it follows the Venus visual cycle as it evolves from morning star through evening star, and then in the retrograde rebirths the cycle. So you'll see like the first conjunction happens in the morning sky, and then the next one happens a little bit later in the cycle, and then you transition to a couple of conjunctions in the evening sky, and then you get that retrograde one, or like now the stationary one, which is just after the retrograde and just after Venus has re-entered the morning sky, right? So morning sky, morning being about beginnings and stuff. So I was like, okay, like, I don't know if Ruperti got that, but it does kind of back up what Ruperti was saying from a visual point of view. Yeah, that one is a new beginning, because it's morning. It's like, it's a new beginning. And then and you can see like how the 5 conjunctions go through visually. I actually have tracked that. I'm going to share, for those of you who are watching the video, I'm going to share what I'm talking about with respect to the current cycle. So Venus just recently, after the retrograde, became morning star again, right? You can see her low in the east just before dawn. And so Venus and Mars are meeting, in Capricorn. And then a little bit later, when they meet in Aquarius, they'll be a little bit higher and brighter. Mm-hmm. And then a couple years later, they'll meet, and Venus is a little bit farther along in her cycle, where she's already become high and bright, and she's in that descending part of her cycle, that long, slow descent before she goes invisible at the superior conjunction. And then finally, they'll meet with an evening star conjunction, and then as number 5, and then the whole cycle will begin again. And so this is when I really became like convinced, or like I really got what Ruperti was saying, from like Ruperti was right, like this one is the one to focus on, because it's literally the beginning of an evolutionary cycle that you can see visually in the sky. Venus progresses through her visual cycle along during these 5 conjunctions. So that was really interesting to figure out, and see like how the visual astrology was backing up what Ruperti was saying. And yeah, it feels like there's like this organic unfolding or evolution that happens over this. And it makes sense, right? Because 6 to 7 years, like that's the fabled 7-year itch that
Yeah, I know. So many
about.
cycles seem to be playing out in that,
Like a
kind
lot
of
of people
7
talk
year.
about 7-year cycles with like Saturn and the progressed moon, but Venus, Mars are the relationship planets. And so it
That's
makes
true.
sense that they have a 6 to 7-year cycle. And yeah, and it makes sense that like if they go through this journey together where they're going along and then morning star and then evening star, and then something happens where if your relationship doesn't reset as the relationship planets reset, something's going to be off, and the relationship's going to grow apart. And like there you have it. The itch is gonna, you're going to be wanting to scratch the itch of that new beginning. And if you can't scratch it with the person you're with, you're going to be, feeling that vibe from somewhere else. It kind of just makes sense, organically speaking.
And it speaks to what we were talking about earlier, with the Martian energy coming in, with the, with the volatilizing,
Yes.
the union. And, are you on the same page? Are you on, do you want to put energy into a unit? Because that's another thing with Mars too, is it's like, where do you put energy? Like,
Exactly. Yeah. Totally.
and so
Totally.
that makes so much sense to me. And it's interesting to see here in the diagram too, with that first conjunction that we're talking about, February 16th of 2022 at 16 degrees of Capricorn, and how when you get to that underworld conjunction, the fourth one on January 7th of 2026,
it's a couple
rather
degrees,
close,
less than 2 degrees away. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So do you have any insights into like kind of like the re-meeting?
That seems to be a pattern that repeats. And I think it has more to do. Michelle Finey wrote a book on the Venus Mars cycle where she looks at the 32-year fractal with their relationship, and she strings them into what she calls Sero series. And I think it has a little bit more to do with that. But like the last cycle, you saw a lot of meetings in Leo, right? The last 6 to 7 year cycle. So the signs within the 6 to 7 year fractal, what I call the Ruperti fractal, they tend to repeat. The signs tend to repeat within that fractal. So last time it was Leo that repeated twice like that, and it was literally near the same degrees. And this time around, it's the Capricorn degrees that are repeating. So yeah, I would say that the way that would be experienced is like the first cycle, because it's first, it's something new. It's like the test drive, it's like that awkward phase of the relationship where like, hey, this feels great. I would definitely want to try it, but we're still figuring out how we line up, and like maybe it's not working, totally great yet, but we still want to try. And then by the time you get around to that next conjunction in Capricorn, it's like, yeah, we know what we're doing. We know what works for us, and we're just like ready to build on that first exploratory phase and really take it, to a whole nother level.
Yeah. It's fascinating to look at in this regard. It always blows your mind. It's easy to focus on astrology and a really pinpointed in this moment, what are you experiencing now? Or like, but when you pull back into cycles, it gives
so much context and so much, like it really gives like a container that you can hold the moment, and that the moment becomes more fertile and fecund because it's being held, it's being contained and bounded by this larger space, and there's room to move and grow. It feels like, yeah, for me, like that's a really, really fundamental part of how I do astrology, is that there is really no singular moment, that all moments are bookended by a series of, it's like everything is parenthetical, basically. Like there's whatever you're looking at, there's what came before and there's what comes after, and it's the what comes before and after that contextualizes any given moment, and it's and it only with all three of them can you really fully get it, I think.
Yeah. And so when I saw you put this chart up on Facebook some time ago, I feel like it was like not too long after the conjunction that was during July.
In July, yeah.
And you're like, people are talking about this conjunction like it's new love, like no, and you're like, this is a closing out.
I was like, this is an ending
and
of a 7-year cycle, man. It's not a beginning. Like we're not even close to beginning yet. Like you need to get ready to enter a liminal place and like let go. Yeah.
You're so right. Like I knew it when at first I was like, oh, and then of course I went and like printed out this whole like chart of like all the conjunctions for, the last, like, since I was born, basically. I was like, okay, let me look at this in my life. And I did this pairing of the 3,
really?
The 5, 1,
Great
2.
For you,
oh, immediately. You're
a woman after my own heart. That's such a thing that I would do. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. I was in there. But I recognized that in my own life. I mean, I saw it playing out, and
that's wonderful.
I was like, you need preach the message, right? Because
it is, test it out, right? Take it for a test drive. And if it works, like keep driving it.
And yeah, it spoke to me a lot. And I feel like it's a message that needs to get out more in the astrological community, especially when we have like drive-by astrology these days, just talking about like, I know, I'm sure
on the one hand, I'm really, really happy that there's a really huge diversity and influx of new energy. But yeah, that's another thing that I wanted to get to here is like, the last 6 to 7 year cycle, having begun in, Leo, it seems like it has to do with like that whole, like really sort of like, influencer type energy of like, post a selfie with a catchphrase and like get a bunch of followers. And like, I'm not dissing Leo, but there is that aspect of like glitz and glam. You know what I'm saying? And
no, I do.
Not necessarily that deep, and I say not necessarily because Leos can totally be deep. And I love the Leos that are, but it's not necessarily that deep always. Whereas with this Capricorn cycle, I feel like it's going to be more about like OG credentials, like time tested, battle hardened, principles that are, you know what I'm saying?
I do. Well, it makes me think of an experience. I mean, that's what Saturn is all about. It's like, what do you have to back this up? What's your discipline look like? How long have you been putting effort in, and what have you constructed based off your practice? I mean, that is
so yeah, like if somebody began under that influence of that Leo, like influencer energy, it's like, it's a call to like get serious and really deepen and systematize and all that stuff. And if not able to do that, it's likely that, it's going to fall by the wayside. Whereas somebody who maybe got sort of overlooked during that Leo influencer glitz glam period, but has been doing their steady work all along, might be brought back up to the surface, or brought back up, into the light because of that. Their work vibes more with the time. Like Capricorn's sexy again.
I guess a Capricorn moon. I'm like, oh, it's always sexy.
You're like, bring it on.
There's never one anymore. But it speaks to me what you're saying, because what we're talking about is honing in a craft, and what is your craft. And to me, Venus and Mars, and especially in the decan of the 3 of Pentacles, and what we were just talking about earlier, of that Mars and Capricorn energy. What is your craft? How, how are you taking the creativity part of it, the receptacle, are you
building a temple, or are you just like having an outdoor rock festival? Because I mean, Woodstock has lasted the ages, but it was a temporal thing. There is no actual temple, that you can go back to per se. And they were really kind of unable to recreate that energy, right?
Yeah. Whereas, it was a one shot.
It's kind of a one-shot deal, and there's nothing wrong with that. One-shot wonders have their place, but yeah, the Capricorn energy is more like building a temple. Like the Notre Dame Cathedral lasted a full Jupiter-Saturn cycle, a full Jupiter-Saturn through the elements cycle, 800 years. Like that's a whole nother deal.
Yeah.
So there's an endurance that comes along with the Capricorn energy that I think is really cool. I'm looking forward to this, of course, being in my Saturn return as an astrologer. I feel like I think I've earned the OG credentials.
I think, yeah, I think you put in the work, Gary. I think you, I feel like if you make it to a Saturn return in your practice, whatever that practice might be, you know what you're doing. And it's probably a turning point around what the actual practice is. I would venture to say, because usually it takes us to the next level experience or maturity in what it is that you do and put effort into. So I want to congratulate you on that, by the way.
Yeah. I'm tooting my own horn a little bit here, or I'm nudging you to toot my horn for me. So
I will. I am a glad tutor of horns. I appreciate it.
But yeah, what's really interesting when I went through this 2,500 year deal, some things that just got my attention, and they're sort of witchy intuitions as much as anything, or warlocky, I guess. I can be a witch, can I?
You can be, yes, to each their own.
Yeah. But one of the first things I noticed is that, like, in this period, a lot of people say they want to compare the American Empire to like the Roman Empire, right? And we're at that stage where it's the fall of Rome. And what they mean by that is the fall of Rome that was when the, Goths sacked Rome, and I don't see us as being there at all, actually. The parallel that drew my attention was what's called the crisis. And remember, that word comes up again and again when I was looking at these Mars periods. The crisis of the Roman Republic, which was when the Republic of Rome transitioned to the imperial dynasty of Rome, like ruled by emperors, right, rather than ruled by Senate and democracy. Because what you had really interestingly, there were two brothers by the name of Gracchus, and they were called the Gracchi. They were like these reformer political figures, and they were assassinated because of the reforms that they brought about. And there was this breakdown of the way that politics was generally practiced, and became like, and then you had Sulla became a dictator, and and he wasn't really the first. Ptolemy and Sulla, there was civil war. They turned their armies, and it was only after those two that famously Caesar turned his army against the Republic, and began the imperial era. And so if you go back to this 100-year period of aberrations, as Blaschke called them, began around in the 1940s. And there were two brothers in the 1960s by the name of Kennedy who were both assassinated, and it's like, whoa, like history, that's Gracchi and Kennedy don't exactly rhyme, but it seems familiar, you know what I'm saying? Like, and it makes me wonder, like, are we waiting for like some kind of American Caesar, and was that Trump, for instance? Like, I don't know. But it feels like, wow, interesting. Another period was the Viking invasions happened during, and like that's total Mars breakdown. Like there was literally, and the Vikings just, have you seen that series? I guess it was, I can't remember, it was on cable originally. I watched it on Amazon, I think, but the TV series
just called The Vikings, right? Yeah. I feel like I saw a couple episodes maybe, but I didn't carry through.
I love that. I love that, man. It was really intense. But yeah, they came upon, these unguarded temples that were rich with booty, like gold and silver, and these that were guarded by monks, the unarmed monks, and they were just like, oh yeah, yes please, and they just like raided and took all this bounty, and like, they found like this rich resource rich land that they could just plunder, and did so for like 100 years of like just causing havoc everywhere and everything. It's like, that's really reflective of the kind of energy of that Mars, that we were talking about, of like, and it forced a re-examination of values, and it forced them to learn how to get along. Like they had to learn how to make peace with the Vikings and live alongside the Vikings, and and there was, and all that. And then, during this period, during the 2000s, we had this invasion of big tech, where, like the big, there was this resource rich land called the internet, and it was plundered by like Google and Facebook and, all of these big, they just came in and like, let's grab all the data and like use it for our own, nefarious purposes and blah, blah, blah. And so it's kind of, there was like, that's when podcasting took off. I started podcasting in 2008. There was literally like a handful, when you searched on iTunes at the time, there was literally like a handful of us doing astrology podcasts. And now there's like dozens, maybe even hundreds. I don't know.
There's a lot out there. Yeah.
Which I think is awesome, because the guy that, my buddy, Kelly Lee Phipps, I'm pretty sure he was like the first astrology podcast. And his book was called, Celestial Renaissance. And I'm sure he's looking down on us and saying like, yep, I told you so. Like there's the Celestial Renaissance that I was talking about. It's happening, and it's really pretty incredible. And I feel like, astrologers are sort of creating the sort of heaven that the internet was supposed to be, where it was supposed to be like this free university and like experimentation, and whereas like the big tech created this sort of like, more like the Jupiter, Saturn, and Earth version of like monetizing everything and like monopolizing everything, whereas the astrologers were creating more of the Aquarian version of the internet, which is like, innovation and all that. So we're sort of, it's interesting because the Venus-Mars cycle overlap on that was like this period where there's this disruptive technology that enters, and it's like different people did different things with it, but the technology itself is not going away. And we're going to have to figure out like, what's the next level? Like a lot of people are talking about Web 3.0 and what's that going to look like, right? And stuff. And so there's a lot of opportunity, I think, to kind of go into that realm of whatever Web 3.0, and like we get to decide what it's going to be by doing it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Pretty exciting.
It is exciting. It makes me think of when you were going through like the examples of the Romans and the Vikings, and it made me think of
right.
it made me think of war and peace just in general, and how they're just natural aspects of living and being human, and how, essentially the war aspect or the crisis aspect, there's some, as people we're out for something, which is very Mars, energy, but the reality is that we have to live together, and that's the Venusian part of it, and where she brings in issues of fairness, as you're talking about the plundering of the internet, and and people getting their data, like the collection of data, and data being the most lucrative industry for in the world, and like, how is this fair? How is this legal to some extent? And so we got to look at the aggressive forward action, which is essentially the Mars component. How is that balanced out, and how does it affect the people, and the connective quality, and what's fair, and if we're aligned with value, which is definitely something I talk about on the podcast all the time. It's like we need to be living and acting from our values, and this is another point of that Mars Venus coming together.
Yeah, really well said. I love it. Yeah, that's it. We're at that intersection of like, how can we go forward and act on our values and live out our values without this sort of toxic masculine, plundering aspect of, like, can't we do better than this? And I think we can, and we will, but it's like that sort of plundering aspect. It's like, it tends to, right in the middle of this 100-year period, there's literally a cycle where it's like the longest Venus Mars opposition. It's like literally the longest possible time between conjunctions happens. And it's like, that's where the crazy shit, that's where the war on terror happened. You know, for instance, that's where it's like stuff breaks down, because there's like this literal, there's the longest period of time between their conjunctions where the distance, the time between them, it breaks apart, and things break down, and there's this plundering, and like that's just part of the deal. Like shit happens, and but now, yeah, we got to go forward and figure out a way to do it without that. Because
without that.
Yeah, because you can't just like live like that forever. Like that's just chaos. That's anarchy.
Well, exactly. And that's the whole nature of Venus coming in, smoothing it over, where Mars,
right.
you know, brought the crisis, and we'll never get out of that pattern. That's just the nature of, you know, cyclical reality and growth as individuals and as a, you know, community.
Right.
So we're in it. Hopefully we evolve along the way.
Yeah, I feel like it's happening. I feel like I feel like astrology has really evolved. It's like I was saying earlier with that woman who shared with me, like just how far the Venus cycle teachings have come. And like I think that the nature of the discourse overall in the astrology community, and it may just be reflective of my own echo chamber, I don't know, but I like to think that the level of discourse the bar has been raised quite a bit over just the last 10 years. And that's really exciting to me, because like we can do better. There's a lot of things we really need to do better on. There's a lot of, you know, and I have plenty of different axes to grind. I won't necessarily bore you with any of the particulars about any of them, but yeah, I think we can do a lot better. And there's a lot of room for innovation. And it's exciting to me as somebody who loves innovation to just be like, yeah, like let's get out there on the frontier and like discover and innovate and make it happen, and you know, make Web 3.0 a reality and live our values and create this, you know, sort of not necessarily utopia, but like this better world that we thought the internet could help us create. You know, let's do it.
That makes me think of just the timeline that you were, I know this isn't really quite part of our Venus and Mars talk, but just the timeline that you were laying down there, and thinking about how we're about to be approaching this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in Pisces, right? And how the last one happened at 24 degrees of Aquarius. And in December of 2009, and I know that's a little bit over 10 years, but thinking about, just kind of like to go along with what you were saying, and that expansion of the, you know, the knowledge, the information, the astrological, you know, contribution, right? Especially having, you know, Aquarius be the seeding of that, and then where Pisces kind of takes that over and can muddle it a little bit, right? You know, we're definitely deluged with a bunch of different, you know, options and energy, and some
rich
not.
Stew,
it is
maybe.
A very, yes. And we have to sort through that. We have to sort through that Pisces and see where, you know, not everything is quite.
That's the positive the Mars, in alchemical sense, the sorting, the dry, right? Dry. Mars is dry, so Mars can like literally fracture stuff and break it, or Mars can just be like, hey, let's sort through this soup, and let's like pick out, you know, the stuff, and like and that's the next level in alchemy. That's how what's called conjunction in alchemy happens, is you have like this sorting that goes on. And the sorting is really interesting. It's a part of the myth of Psyche as well. Like she has to sort through these seeds. Like, I don't know if a lot of people realize it, but like it's sort of the feminine version of the Herculean labors. Like Psyche, Aphrodite gives Psyche a series of labors, right? And one of them is sorting through this pile of seeds. So there's this sorting that happens, and the sorting enables like a gathering together of things that are actually compatible. And that's how you get out of the crisis mode and into the next regular, you know, fractal, is that you have to do the sorting, and then you have to do the moist bringing together of the sorting of stuff that actually, you know, that will adhere, and you get that, and then you get that what's called the lesser stone, you know, and the lesser stone is like the step of like the whole next phase of the alchemy. So yeah, that's a really good point. Like, yeah, there's some sorting to do just by the nature of like, it's just too much, and you have to, for your own sanity, you have to be able to pick and get, and, and make your own sort of like, spice blend, if you will, of like, what tastes, go with, the kind of stuff you like to take in. And yeah, and so that's kind of where we're at. And yeah, it's really exciting. I'm really looking forward to what the next, next 20 years of my career, and seeing what people come up with. And I still have a lot of work that what I want to do is I actually want to, buy back my time, where I can just like create a sacred container where I can just do some writing, because I have all of these ideas. I need to freaking get them down.
That's right. This is the point. This is the point when you take all that knowledge and you dedicate it to
actually,
the legacy.
Yeah, right. So that's kind of where I'm at. And so, yeah, I'm happy that there's lots of people like, because I'll probably have to take a break from the podcasting to do that part, right? So I'm really happy that there's people like you carrying the podcasting torch. That's awesome. And, more power to them. And yeah, it's exciting. I think that that Aquarian sort of, the new age vision of Aquarius is a little bit not realistic, but at the same time, there is it's not completely unrealistic either. Like there's a definite diversity to the astrology community now. And there's like you said, almost an overwhelming diversity in the Piscean terms of like, and that's a good thing, because like from that, there's a lot to choose from, and you can take in, there's all of these like, conjunctions of different things that can come together and form even more, next level stuff. So yeah, I think that these Mars Venus conjunctions can be really powerful tools for us to consciously choose to align with that force within us, right? That force that brings together the fixed and the volatile, and allows for this magical birth of this new creative thing that's going to come out. And like, yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Because I mean, you think of the two of them come together, and there's kind of this completeness to some extent for a small period of time. And when you have completeness, it's like you have all the tools before you. It's like you have all the resources at that point in that like little period of time that can, start the mission or hand the baton over. You think about the delegation of, switching focus to what you want to create next. That's another thing too, with Mars being very focal point of energy and that creation. It's like a good, like, well, what have I already created? All right, we'll let that go. And now I'm on to my next project, which is very Capricorn, I would say, with that. But now I always like end programs with key, like this is hard for a lot of us wordy people.
I'm glad you gave me a heads up, because I probably would have stumped me, but yeah, I got a word for you.
Oh, good. Because I was like, if you had one word, and people look at me like, are you crazy? I have so many words. So if you had one word to describe each of these conjunctions, and I don't know if you want a word for the Leo one back in, I'm springing this on you. You don't have to, but because thinking about the pair or the triple type of energy, right. But especially with February.
Yeah, let's see what I can do. So yeah, that was like in that third decan of Leo, right? So that's like,
I think it was in the it was like right at the tail end of the second. Like,
what is it? Okay.
It was like 19 and 50 something minutes.
So like finding your sacred Leo roar or something like that. Well, that's not even one word, is it? Roar.
I know. Roar is the word.
Roar. Roar.
It's like the ending roar, kind of.
Yeah, well, it's the ending that is the sort of seed of the beginning, right? Yeah. And I mean, the word for the Capricorn one for me would be Saturnalia. Because there's this very alchemical mixing of opposites, where they would have like, this festival where the the master would become the slave and the slave would become the master. And like there, people were like, getting it on in the alley, and like social conventions were pretty much like tossed aside for a short period of time. And like, like all kinds of stuff was going on. So yeah, and that's typically associated with the Capricorn, time of year. So Saturnalia just feels like a natural word for that one. With Aquarius, I would say for me, frontiers, like getting out into the frontiers. Yeah. So
I like that. I like that. Yeah, it's hard, isn't it?
It is. But it's a good exercise. It's a good exercise, right? Reduce it to its bare minimum.
Because we have so many words, and sometimes we have so many words, we're like, what are we saying? I mean, we know what we're saying to some extent, but when you have to like finite it into one word,
that's a whole nother level from like, you had like Facebook it's like what they call micro blogging, and then tweets became like a certain number of characters, and then one word, like that's pretty darn minimalist. That's about as minimalist as you can get.
You can't have half a word. I mean, maybe, but if it's hyphenated, but
yeah, we could do that. Fill in the blank to get the word or something, right? Or the thing
my
you
goodness.
do with curse words, where you like use the other characters to like disguise it a little bit or whatever, so it's not quite the F word, but it is.
But it still is. It's the masking of the underlying notion that is being shared.
Right.
Yeah. So no, that's excited. I'm excited. I mean, it's on my moon. I'll let you know. For me, I guess the word's moon, but that's private.
I should definitely make a point of checking in with you at some point during the cycle, and we can come back and maybe with the other conjunctions and like revisit or something. That'd be fun.
That would be great. There,
right
I do know I'm working on some writing and some teaching projects. Excellent. And that's a third house affair for this Capricorn third house moon. So that could definitely be appropriate for that. And I'm looking at relocating. And so, Aquarius is my fourth house. So there's all that's taking place.
That's a really crazy, talk about disruption. I mean, my God, the real estate market has been insane.
Don't tell. Well, that's interesting with Venus and Mars coming together in Capricorn and all the Taurus activations of Uranus and the North Node coming. There's more to be shared on that story.
Right.
Yeah, that's so hopefully the gods will do me good. It's funny when you were talking about when we were talking about Jupiter Neptune real quick, and like I forget the whole phrase, and it might be controversial too, but and I'm from the South, but it's like,
same here.
Let God sort them out, I was thinking about I know there's something that goes before that is a little rough, but it just makes me think about like just the whole idea of like fated interaction.
Absolutely. And that's how my last move occurred. Like, my wife was saying she needed to move, her mom was she needed to be closer to her mom. And I was like, honey, I don't know how to get there. Like what you're asking me is like, I don't know how to do it. Like, we're going to need divine intervention. And that's what we got, and it was really, and so yeah, never rule out like the divine intervention, man. Like sometimes that's the only way stuff can happen, Absolutely. The fated aspect.
Well, and to play off of what we were saying about Venus and Mars, and how I think that the divine fated aspect is a very crucial component of all what is Saturn's building, is because, I mean, we're talking about Capricorn and Aquarius back to back, and we're talking about foundation, and we're talking about plan, and we're talking about vision, and we're talking about future potentials. And so we have this like idea, we kind of have the steps in place, but there is going to be that divine component of all that Piscean energy. And especially when the eclipses come with Taurus, and then having so much happening in Pisces, and the ruler Venus conjunct Jupiter at that time, right before that conjunction. I think there is just a lot of like, we're going to have to wait for the fate. That sounds like a bumper sticker. We're going to have to wait for the fate to come in to really help develop the plan.
Doorways, right? And that's what the nodes really represent to me a lot of times. Like they look like doorways or gates, Feels like there's sort of fated gates that like, you wanted something, you were trying to make something happen, and then all of a sudden there's an opening and you got to seize it, so there will be that carpe momentum
There's that
moment.
Mars, right? You gotta
Right?
go wait for
Well,
the gate of fate. There we go. That's
yeah,
the
there you go. You got it. You got it, Mel.
wait for.
Wait for the gate of fate.
I will have a
The
Shopify
gate of
up
fate.
soon with
That's my new, I'm gonna steal that. That's my new term for the nodes. The
get
gates of
in
fate.
there, get in there. Gate of
Ah,
fate, gates of fate. Oh my gosh, Gary, it was so fun talking to you about all
you
things
too.
Venus and Mars and
Excellent.
beyond.
Right on.
Yeah. So, well, where can people find you? What do you got going on? You got any
Right.
courses, workshops, etc.?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. So my website is dreamastrologer.com. And be sure that you sign up for all the main stuff, all the main links and stuff right there on the front page. So sign up for my newsletter because I'm going to be sending one of those out pretty soon. And I'm actually doing some magic with these Venus Mars conjunctions. Like I got some Kama Sutra coins I got these coins like with the Kama Sutra images on them. So, but not all of them. Some of the elections are more for like you said, like business opportunities, and some of them are more for like spiritual love, but there is definitely the erotic aspect there.
The Saturnalia.
Yeah. And I'm going to be doing some magical workings with those, and I'm going to be sending out like a sample. I do a magical report every month. And so I'm going to be sending out a shorter sample version of that with the Venus Mars stuff sometime in the next week or so. So make sure you sign up for my newsletter if you want to get that for free. Check out the special offers page where if you like all this conversation, I have what I call a bundle of a lecture bundle, which is like basically all the talks. Like I said, I gave this material at the first Sky Astrology conference. All of, I did have lectures that I recorded, both of parts of the essay that I mentioned, like all of my Venus Mars material put together in one bundle, and you can get it for like $35, which is cheap because I think it's like at least 7 lectures. And so what is that? That's like
That's a
what?
steal.
Steal,
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's that. And then if you want to sign up to be a member, we're 1 week into 1 week or 1 month or one lesson into like a 6-lesson series that I'm doing with my members. And the members get that magic report that I was talking about. So there's that as well. And then let's see, I'm trying to think. I've got, as far as dates, I think I'm talking for Baltimore Astrological Society in March. There's a page on my site for that too. So with all my, I'm going to be with Astrology Hub later in the year, and then Stormy Grace YouTube deal after that. And I'm missing somebody. I think Astrology Society of Connecticut later. And I think I got everybody.
This is what your website's for. It's like
that's what the website's for. Yeah.
It's like that's how you keep track of it.
Yeah, dreamastrologer.com. Check it out. And hope to see some of your people. And I'm going to point my people to you as well. I hope that they check out what you're doing. It looks like you've got an incredible, like really diverse range of people that you've had on your show, and congratulations for you've made it, a good ways here now. Pod fade is a real thing.
It is. I had it. I engaged with it. I used to do every single week, and then I went down to like a month, and now I do kind of bi-weekly.
I went through that. Yeah, I went through that. Yeah,
you just gotta feel it out. But I'm rounding the bend here. In April will be 4 years of podcasting, and thank you. And I enjoy it. That's like one thing why I haven't, like, even if I had a lull for a moment here and there, it's just like I enjoy conversing with another, a like mind, and that gives me joy. So you got to do what you enjoy, right? I mean, that's like the secret of life.
Other people seem to enjoy it as well, so even better.
Yes, thank you for all that listen and continue to stay listening with me. But that's another thing with Venus Mars. It's like, do what you enjoy, but just adding that in there.
Follow your bliss, as Campbell said, right?
Yeah. Well, where can you find me? Which I will always, I always share a blog post on each guest that comes on. So just in case you didn't catch Gary's information, I will definitely have it over on the blog post at energeticprinciples.com, on my newly redesigned website that I'm I don't know. That's what I did during the Venus retrograde, basically, in my third house.
Restructure.
It was a redesign, restructure. It felt good.
Awesome.
So come on over and visit me there. You can visit me on the old Instagram at Energetic Principles, and sign up for my mailing list, the Heavenly Wind, if you want to get all the details for the month ahead. February's just went out, but I periodically check to see if there's new subscribers, and I'll send it out for those who subscribe mid-month or whatever. But come check that out. It's a lot of information with transits and a elemental tarot forecast, and of course my branded animal ambassador, as a lot of people like out there, including myself, gotta engage with those animals. So come on over, sign up for that free newsletter. And really, yeah. And if you like this program and you want to share it with a friend, sharing is caring, spread the good word, get it out there, leave a review where you listen to this, because it helps elevate the podcast to be seen in search functions and the good old algorithm. And yeah, so I think that's my spiel there. I want to thank you again, Gary, for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Mel. It's been a great time. I hope we can do it again.
Absolutely. You are welcome back anytime. So, all right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for tuning in today. We wish you the best during the Venus-Mars conjunctions and beyond. And as always, may the stars be with you.